Welcome to the Health Fix podcast, where health junkies get their weekly fix of tips, tools, and techniques to have limitless energy, sharp minds, and fit physiques for life. Hey, health junkies. On this episode of the Health Fix podcast, I'm interviewing Dr. Jeff Crippen. He's on a mission to live life to the fullest and help others do the same. He's a chiropractor, he's a nutritionist, and he's a coach who helps enjoying watching folks unlock their true potential. And gosh, he's got a story. He, at 6 years old, began suffering from migraines and really went through the medical system and folks telling him, like, I don't know, we don't know what's wrong. We don't know why you're having these symptoms. And at age 13, he found the powerful combination of chiropractic and individualized nutrition care. And so today, we're going to be talking about his approaches to migraines, but not only that, we're going to talk about his new book. We're going to talk about really how he's helping folks in person and online. He's in St. Joe, Texas, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And we're going to talk about how he's helping folks with their migraines and general health as well online. And his new book, Timeless Youth, that's available everywhere. It's something we'll talk about as well. So this is a fun podcast because we're talking about health transformation. We're talking about looking at health as a continuum. We're talking about how we want to kind of necessarily think about getting away of that problem focused, just the migraines, thinking about what else in health in someone's life could be contributing to those migraines. So let's introduce you to Dr. Jeff Crippen. Hey, health junkies, I have Dr. Jeff Crippen on, and we are going to be talking about something I haven't talked about, migraines, but we're also going to be talking about transformational health and how I really do secretly want all of you to start thinking about health that way versus this problem solving just one thing at a time situation. And Dr. Jeff's all on board in that too. So Dr. Jeff, welcome to the Health Fix podcast.
Awesome. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Hey, no problem. I was reading through your website and I was looking at how you got into this whole gig of being a chiropractor, working with nutrition, being a naturopath. And I went, I get it. Because all of my folks that have migraines and a history of migraines since, in your case, you're 6 years old, holy cow, definitely struggle. And it's amazing that at 13, you kind of realize like, oh man, there's more to this than the next neurologist and the next pill. Tell us a little bit of how you started to discover natural remedies and natural therapies and nutrition and all of that to help with your migraines.
Yeah, awesome. And thank you for that question. Yeah, the way I got into natural healthcare was only because I never wanted to get into natural healthcare. Like the only reason I found any of it is because I got progressively frustrated, and I started getting headaches when I was 6 years old. And I kind of, I did what I do, or really my parents did, what we knew to do, which is, give some over-the-counter Tylenol or children's Motrin or children's aspirin. And you try a couple of those, that doesn't work. Then what do? You go see your pediatrician. So I went to the pediatrician, and then they give you something a little stronger. And then when that doesn't work, they give you something a little stronger and it's got a prescription by it. And then when that doesn't work, in my case, they said, well, hold up. This is a couple of years in now. They said, this is a problem, right? So progressively worsening headaches that don't respond to painkillers. And a young child, I was, 6 when it started. This is probably around 8. It's a potential red flag symptom. Like, hey, there could be something bad going on here, right? So they did a CT scan, found something in my brain. They didn't know what it was. So they had me do an MRI. And this is 92 or so. So, the quality of, the CT scans and the MRIs was a little different back then. They've gotten much better. But they couldn't see what it was. So then they said to do an MRI. And what they ended up finding was something called a congenital arachnoid cyst. But basically what it means, I had a little growth about the size of a dime in kind of the occipital or the back part of my brain. And for any football fans out there, there's a coach that we're talking about, the Midwest connection here before we started, but University of Florida and Ohio State University, Urban Meyer was the football coach for a while. And he actually retired from coaching twice because of headaches. And he actually has that same congenital arachnoid cyst. Is what's there. So there's a couple different ways they can treat it medically, but or try to manage the symptom really. But so anyway, it's about 1 to 3% of the population. But anyway, I have it. So then they talk about doing surgery, and I'm like 8 years old and thinking, well, that sounds like a great idea. Like I was all for brain surgery. Like that's how desperate I was, and that's how bad the pain was. I was in the doctor's office, and it was like, well, we don't think you're quite a candidate to do surgery at age 9 in your head. And I was disappointed. It's like I just wanted the headaches to go away. Like that's like what my mindset was going in. So tried some different drugs. You just going searching through the system, and that's kind of what I was for a while. And unfortunately, the headaches were getting worse and getting worse and getting worse. And at its worst, I had a headache for 2 years, every moment, every day, nonstop for 2 years. So you get through that point, and I felt like I had seen different doctors and different systems and tried different drugs and tried the new class of I think it was triptan headache medications that came out around that time or early 90s that was touted as a miracle cure. And anyway, some of the worst headaches I had were taking those. So anyway, I tried that, and then it didn't work. So it's only because of the only reason I got into this is because none of that other stuff ended up working for me. So that was kind of the beginning of it. But I did, there was points along the way that they said, when they said, hey, maybe that cyst in your brain is causing the headaches. I did about a dozen MRIs over the next 10 years, making sure it didn't grow. Like they're tracking it, making sure it didn't grow. And they were still thinking that could be causing the headaches. But what didn't make sense to me is how could that thing, that cyst in my head that never grew, be causing my headaches when sometimes my headaches were bad and sometimes they were less bad. Sometimes they were on the right side of my head and sometimes they were on my whole head. And sometimes they went around the top. You're right. I mean, basically the symptoms changed, but that cyst never did. That was one of the first things I remember, even early teens, just thinking, how does that make sense? Another thing was, the doctor would, prescribe a different medication, and often, it'd be a long visit, but you'd see the doctor for whatever, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And nobody ever told me why I had the headaches, but they were all very, very willing and, did their best probably to give me different drugs and try different things to do. But no one ever could tell me why the pain was there. And that was curious. I do remember having a conversation with my mom, like, how can they tell me they know the solution without understanding the cause of the problem? So you just have little moments of that. It wasn't enough to get me to make any big changes or anything like that. It was just like these little things start adding up. And eventually, when you kind of hit that low point, I got to the point where I just decided I couldn't go on like I was feeling. And I really didn't get too specific on what that meant, but it was just like this idea that pain was just so horrific. I was like, I'm not going to go on living this way. So I'm either going to figure it out, or I didn't really want to even think about what the other part was. But that was kind of the beginning of kind of what pushed me to say, there's got to be another option other than a dozen medications I've already tried, orthopedists, neurosurgeons, neurologists, kind of the litany of, dozen plus doctors that I'd seen, just trying to find some relief for the pain. And so that was kind of the beginning of that story.
Wow. I mean, it's not uncommon what you're talking about. I hear it often, and especially to the point where it's like folks are like, I will literally stick a knife in my own head just to, get rid of the pain. I've had people tell me all kinds of things that they were thinking about. And ultimately you came to looking at alternative healthcare. You came to look at chiropractic. You looked at nutritional therapies. When you first started looking at these things as a teen and going, all right, what could I try? Did you start with dietary stuff? Did you have enough? I mean, because I'm like, okay, internet is like in its infancy at this time. If I'm doing the math right here, and I'm going, okay, how did you have somebody? Did you get to see a chiropractor? Did your parents take you to a chiropractor? What happened? How did you start working on it?
So eventually, I think what it started was I've always enjoyed reading. I've always loved to read. So you kind of just read books, and I don't remember what it's not like. You just start reading books, and the problem with reading, books sometimes is they'll list 15 different things for headaches that all of them are good ideas, but the question is, how do you know which one's right for you? And I remember this because like my parents, like my parents' friends would come over. I was like passed out on the couch in pain almost, most of the time. So like, they kind of like, they knew what was going on. And then you'd have some people that say, hey, do you know that, coffee could cause your headaches? and I was like 9 years old. And so like, I didn't really think that was the reason. I don't drink coffee. And then other people would say, I heard coffee's good for headaches. It can prevent them. I was like, I'm still 9 years old, right? It's like, then a couple of years later,
Thanks.
it's like, I heard you could have, yeah, exactly. That's useful. And then you heard somebody say, hey, red wine can cause headaches. It was like 12 at the time, and that wasn't the cause. And then you have other people say, hey, red wine could prevent headaches, right? There's some good, again, there was resveratrol, whatever they were getting into, but so it was all this confusion in the space is kind of where I was at. So, I think that was the beginning of just trying to sort through the morass of confusion about, something as simple as what to eat or what is diet, or even defining what the heck health is, right? Because my conception of health at the time was, you go to a doctor, he gives you a drug to take away the symptom, kind of, which is, that was kind of what I understood. But then what happens if you're taking the drug and the symptom's not going away? Right. And that kind of opened up some questions. So through that time, I did eventually see a chiropractor. So then you've got the friends that are just like, you have to go see this person. So I saw an acupuncturist and somebody who did Chinese medicine. And I don't remember much other than I took some herbs that smelled really bad. And anyway, it ended up making it worse. I didn't feel better after that. Then I went to see it. And you got to go see this chiropractor. So you go see a chiropractor. And what I found is I would get some symptomatic relief with chiropractic. So like if I had a headache and it was a 7 out of 10, the pain level would go down to like a 4 out of 10 after the adjustment. So it would help. But I still noticed the headaches were increasing in intensity and severity. So it's still getting worse. So I still actually kept looking for answer. And finally, I, after about a year, there's a doctor who does nutrition. He's a chiropractor. He does something called, some energy or some muscle testing. And they said, you got to go see this guy. So I'm in the office, and I just remember, trying to be respectful, but I was 13 years old on the table and I was laughing. I mean, because it just looked, it looked so bizarre. It was such a different way of thinking about health. I'm used to like the white coat and the guy comes in the tie and the medical office buildings or whatever it is, and that whole deal. So to step out of that system for me was a striking change. And I'd say it was difficult because still through that time, I'm still trying different medical doctors. I'm still trying to work in the medical system, kind of looking for answers. So that was kind of that journey of you kind of never wanted to leave that medical system. I kept trying different things because nobody in my family had ever seen a chiropractor before. Nobody in my family had ever gone to a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine or an acupuncturist. No one had ever seen a naturopath or someone who focused on holistic nutrition. Like nobody, I had an uncle who's a medical doctor, right? I mean, so it's like that was very much ingrained in kind of our culture, our family. And so everything else was kind of 2 steps out, 1 step back, kind of trying trepidation, kind of uncertainty, but it was kind of it was a real different point of view. And it took years to even try any of it, at least in my experience.
Wow. So now fast forward to now, and you're working with folks. I'm guessing you've seen some folks with some migraines over time. Are you doing like what's the first thing you do? I'm curious because a lot of folks, when they come to me, I'm looking at nutrition, I'm looking at muscles. I don't do muscle testing. I just am not skilled in it. But what's kind of one of the first things you do when you see someone, you're like, all right, they've got migraines. What do you want to look at? Hormones?
Yeah, that's a great question. So thankfully the headaches are, totally gone. They've been gone for, 10, 15 years. And if I get one now, I know why kind of thing, but I'm back. So so I feel good about that. It happens to be, we have a practice where we see all kinds of different things. Probably not unlike yourself, but headaches are the one symptom I know better than any other that'll walk into my office. And so when somebody comes in with headaches, there's kind of 4 main systems that I kind of look at or work through. So one is basically brain. How is the brain working? What are the nutrients the brain needs? The second is thyroid. Third is heart. And fourth one is adrenals. And what I found is no matter, as in general, you can get a ton of benefit from headaches looking at those 4 symptoms and trying to prioritizing those and see which one's worse. which one's worse, which one's not working, and then what you need to do to optimize it. And then, we also, that can include kind of spine and adjustment. But, most times when someone comes in with a headache, I expect to be able to get it better, quite quickly, before they leave the office kind of thing. But those are kind of conceptually the four systems I think about. And we can go into more detail on any of those, but brain, thyroid, heart, and kind of adrenals.
Interesting. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people don't tie all those together, especially the heart. Let's talk about that side there first and then go into the thyroid and adrenals.
Yeah, well, it's great that you asked that, because that was actually, and so when I'm talking about heart, I'm talking about the physical heart, but I'm also talking about circulation in general, right? The interesting thing about headaches is, and maybe migraines specifically is what I'm talking about right now. There's a lot of theories about what causes a migraine, but they're really not sure. I mean, generally they think there's a vascular component to migraines, but the exact mechanisms on how that work are like relatively unknown. And how do we know that? Well, because there's still tons of people suffering with migraines, and the medications there's no like magic medication for migraines. If someone had one, they'd be making medically in that system, they'd be making a ton of money for it. So what do I think through around circulation? What do I notice around circulation? Well, in terms of heart, so I know this one particularly well, because this is actually the first thing I was on a whole food supplement to support cardiac function, and that was actually the first thing I ever took to help with headaches. So nutrient wise, what's really important for heart are certain B vitamins. There's some B vitamins can generally be divided into the B vitamins that are more stimulatory or vasoconstrictive, and B vitamins that are more relaxing. Vasodilated, the term vasoconstrictive means they make the blood vessel smaller, generally raise your blood pressure a little bit. Vasodilatory means they lower the blood pressure a little bit more relaxing. So anyway, both sets of B vitamins. Some whole food vitamin C can be really important for heart function. We get into any food sources, or kind of deep dive a little bit more on any of those if you want. And then obviously you could look at things like omega-3, you can look at vitamin D, and then you can look at some of the minerals that are involved in kind of that circulation of the heart. It's heart and circulation, and then certain herbs, things like ginkgo, that can improve circulation of the brain. But what I typically find with kind of a chronic headache or chronic migraine is some degree of stress, right? And even let's take even a woman around her cycle, right? I mean, often, and then you want to know what part of the cycle is it happening in, right? And then obviously, so how does that relate to this? Well, the adrenals, as an example, have a huge part in, especially the first half of the cycle, producing the progesterone before kind of the corpus luteum, or the ovaries kind of take over on that. So you can look at adrenals and stress, and just going through a cycle can be a stressful event for body, right? As an example. So anyway, we can go through each of those, but looking at what's the stressor on which of those organs and what you can do to correct it is kind of what I think through there.
That's awesome, because I think a lot of people, when they think about migraines, it's literally like, yes, circulation to a point, but only to their head, not what's going on with their heart and in the whole body. And then the hormones, like, yes, we think about it because of, especially if you're still cycling, there's so many connections there, but we don't think about it in terms of like, oh, the adrenal glands and the thyroid. Tell us a little bit about the thyroid connection that you share with folks.
Yeah. So, what woman who's going cycling may or may not have kids, may or may not be working, but which one of them isn't stressed and slightly more stressed at that time of the month, right? From life, but also from the cycle. And obviously the thyroid's involved in the hormonal cycle, especially kind of in the middle of that cycle as well, with and kind of connects to ovarian function as well. But so with thyroid, so what I'm looking at is, so a headache, just quite simply, if you have a plant on your desk and all of a sudden one of the leaves turns brown, it's a sign that something's not right about the plant, right? And, we'd either look for, hey, that plant needs some more sunlight, or a little bit more water or some nutrients in the soil, right? But basically, that's what we look at. We take that one symptom of a brown leaf and say, hey, it's a sign that whole plant isn't as healthy as it could be. And what do we need to do to make the plant more whole? Well, we don't look at the brown leaf and say, oh, I think that thing has a disease. We'll call it brown leafitis. And we'll treat it with a small thing of spray paint, or we'll cut off the leaf, right? You could do all those sorts of things that would get rid of the symptom of a brown leaf, but does nothing to correct the whole. So how do we relate this to headaches? So pain in the head is not normal, full stop. It's a sign that something stressed the body.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's really what I want to look for. So specifically what can happen is, in all of those systems, adrenals or stress response get under there. But what can happen is something be pushing the gas on the thyroid a little bit too much.
Mm-hmm.
So what you might do is there's certain minerals that are relaxing or calming to the thyroid.
Mm-hmm.
Certain minerals like you'd find in, alfalfa, but magnesium, manganese, potassium can be kind of relaxing or calming to the thyroid. Calcium would certainly be one of those minerals as well. And then the other thing is an analogy that often makes sense. If you drive your car 100 miles an hour nonstop for 6 hours, are you more likely to have some engine trouble? Yeah. What if you drive it that way for 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're just more likely to have some things burned out. So that's the way I look at stress with some of those organs. It's just what's got the gas floored. And the idea is if you burn more gas if you drive your car nonstop through the night. It's the same thing with the thyroid or the adrenals or with that chronic stress response. So what vitamins are you depleting? What minerals are you depleting? What's the gas of that body in that sense? And what do you need to do to replace? And often there's certain alkaline minerals, so alkaline or acid, kind of going back to
Mm-hmm.
high school chemistry class there, but kind of calming minerals, and just kind of the relaxing part of the B vitamins can often go a long way at just kind of restoring balance to both of those systems.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And, looking at stress obviously as being one of our biggest stressors,
Yeah.
yes, external, then there's internal, then there's the things we say internal and all of that as well. And I think this is a great way to kind of segue into talking about the concept of health transformation versus going into the doc, just being like, doc, I've got a migraine. Now, you tied in already the thyroid, the heart, the adrenals, etc. So let's talk a little bit about your book, and let's talk a little bit about health transformation, because you're talking about the 5 truths of transformational wellness in your book, Timeless Youth book. Well, that's the website, Timeless Youth. But tell us a little bit about health transformation. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to you?
Yeah. So I think so. When I really thought about what did I want to I really thought about what did I want to communicate to patients, or really I thought, what did I want to communicate to me when I was 6 years old, or really what did I want to communicate to my parents, or what do I want to communicate to your listeners who have kids that are going through something, or patients who maybe don't quite feel right, feel a little tired, feel a little stressed out, maybe have an autoimmune condition. You kind of go to your doctor and they're kind of like, here's an antidepressant, try this drug to calm, this immunosuppressant drug to calm down the autoimmune disease. Or I don't know, your blood work looks fine, everything must be okay. And what I wanted to write a book is for people like that maybe felt like I did at the time, which is just frustrated or feeling like that system's not listening to you. So that was kind of, and what I realized is the healthcare system has kind of 2 issues. One is it has nothing to do with health, right? And 2 is there's often little care in that system. Now, there's a lot of great people in it. There's a lot of great technology. There's phenomenal diagnostics. There's great people in the system, but it's a disease treatment system is what it is if we really look at it. You walk in with a headache like I did, they're going to give you something to treat the symptom of the pain in the head, right? Some pain relievers. They're not going to try to look at what the cause is or really dive deeper on that unless under the most extreme circumstances. So that's what that system is. So what I realized is a lot of us are kind of brainwashed, to use a better word, since we grew up, that we see health as not having symptoms. When we have a symptom, we go to the doctor, go to the medical system to squash that symptom. And that can be useful if your goal is to get rid of symptoms. It can be totally useful and totally valid. It's just not health. So the question is, what is health? And how do you figure out what that is? And that's really what, I mean, it took me years to try to figure that out. And then how to kind of map that progress on the road. So, you know, that's kind of what the intention was of the book, is to find that there. So an example I like to give is, if you're in a dark room and somebody tells you to get rid of the darkness, what do? Do you fight the darkness? Do you try to put it in a box and hide it in the corner? You know, do you spend all your time trying to get rid of that negative, that thing you don't want, the darkness, or do you turn on the light? Right. And I think it's pretty simple. Most people would walk in a dark room and say, "Oh, I just turn on the light." Well, I think that's what it is with disease. We can spend all of our time fighting the disease, trying to control the disease, trying to limit the disease, trying to put the disease in a box and forget about it. Or we can just increase health. And that's what this book is, the principles of how do you help increase health and what are the signs you're moving on that path. So just going back to the headache, you can treat that symptom with a pain relieving medication. And for most people that works somewhat, you just might be taking them for a while in your life. But if you want to look at actually what creates health, then you have to find out what part of the room's dark, right? And that's what I was giving the example of the thyroid or the adrenal or the heart or the brain. And where do you need to turn on the light? And can you find the right light switch to turn on? So that's the way I like to look at health, is not, or disease is not the presence of something. Disease isn't the presence of something, but rather the absence of health. So we can treat disease to the extent we're treating it is actually by not treating disease at all, by helping the person get healthier. Because by definition, you can't be healthy and sick at the same time. So if we just help someone get healthier, then by definition, they're becoming less sick.
That's a great explanation. And I don't think a lot of people are talking about it that way, because we've, like you said, we've been brainwashed to think that I have this condition and that's what I want to focus on. And anyone who's done mindset work, you know, the more you focus on the disease or the issue, the more that you're going to have of that. And instead thinking about wellness and how to do everything else around the migraine to get you well, perhaps the migraine will just resolve itself.
Yeah, because here's the simple thing, super simple. Every effect has a cause. It may seem really obvious. If you have a migraine today and you didn't have one yesterday, guess what? There's a cause, there's a reason. Now, it can be difficult to find out what it is, but something changed. If someone has normal blood pressure one day, then all of a sudden they develop high blood pressure, a change in that symptom the next day, something changed. And the answer to finding out how to make someone healthier is there's a lot of information in that change point. If you can really dive down and find out what the heck changed for that person, all of a sudden someone has ulcerative colitis symptoms, or diarrhea, constipation, change in bowels, inflamed, bloating, right? There's a reason for that. And we got to find what it is. Because if you can't find that, you're treating the symptom. But if you can, and you can find out what changed, because again, the rule I use is every effect has a cause. So something changed for sure, whether you know what it is or not. There was a change, because blood pressure just doesn't all of a sudden become high. We don't all of a sudden just develop bowel disease or autoimmune disease, right? Every effect has a cause. So if you could find that change point and really dig in deep there, there's a lot of information in there. And then once you know what it is, then it's a lot easier to kind of get back on the road to health.
Makes sense. So I'm guessing that you have folks kind of in your office going back in time, and they're going, all right, when did this start? Perhaps you're having them journal to try to identify what might be the shift or new introduction or something.
Yeah. And you want to know. And sometimes it's hard for them to find out. Right. And that's the idea of a good history. It's like, I had a patient, just left the office a couple hours ago, but they came in and they were diagnosed with Crohn's disease about 10 months ago, had 3 different flares up, had a colonoscopy, confirmed inflammation in the gut, and they were put on some antispasmodics. And the doctor's solution was, here's a drug you can take. You now have an autoimmune disease and you're going to take it for the rest of your life. But okay. Great. In my experience, when someone has some kind of inflammatory bowel condition, whether it's Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or something like that, it's one of three things, right? It's either some kind of parasite living in the gut, some kind of fungal issue, or some kind of food intolerance. That's what I typically find because, they did the X-ray, or they did the imaging. They did a stool test to measure inflammatory markers. So they said, well, you have more inflammation than average in your gut. Okay, great. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's the question you have to ask. So in that example, so one is I'm looking at timeline. I'm looking at when did it start? I'm looking at what was going on that time. Did they have a trip to Mexico as an example where you got sick? Did they have a stomach virus that preceded it? And so you start asking, can they spot what's going on? And said, no, you know what? Actually, I and my whole family got sick for about a month, about 6 months before that. And I had the exact same pain in January, right before I got that symptom in July. Could that be connected? And I said, well, probably likely, because in my experience, it's one of those three things to look at. So we're working on this dysbiotic gut now. And then you look at history of, so then it's the clinician's questions can help. So then do you have a history of anything that would lead to a lot of antibiotics, right? Do you have a mechanism or something, like biologically plausible is kind of what I like to think of it in my mind. But do you have something that could be reasonable in terms of why the person might have developed a fungal infection or a gut or a dysbiotic gut? Do you like fermented foods? Do you eat them often? Right? And you start going through that. I hate it. I never eat them. I hate sauerkraut or whatever. Okay, great. So you're kind of like asking questions in that history or what I think about to constantly confirm what I think is true, or to refute what I think is true, and kind of take us closer or further away from that. So I think one is asking the patient questions, and you go as far as you can with that. And sometimes the patients say they know what's going on, and it's great, and they can tell you right to it. And the other time it's kind of relying on some experience, and then some in-office testing we do to kind of confirm or refute that kind of hypothesis.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and ultimately, the way that's confirmed is the patient gets better,
Yeah.
right? Because ultimately, you could think you're the smartest person in the world. The patient, oh, doctor, it makes so much sense. None of that matters unless the patient gets better in the way they want to get better, right? So that's the ultimate measure of, not that I was right or the patient was right or we found the right thing, but the ultimate measure is, does the patient, get what they want in the area, and that in the body can be a great way to tell you, hey, you're on the right track. The patient got what they wanted, or hey, there's more to learn here and you got to keep digging on it.
Absolutely. It's impressive. I mean, our bodies do talk to us. They do let us know what's up, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So I've got a great idea, I think, in terms of how you practice. I think folks are like, okay, all right, we got a great understanding here of Dr. Jeff. Now, you are in St. Joe, Texas, correct? If they want to come down in person. And Crippen Wellness, so CRIPPEN wellness.com if they want to come see you or connect with you online. Tell us a little bit about how online works if they are not in the Texas area.
Yeah, so just St. Joe it's a town of about 800, 1,000 people. So we're about 900, 1,000 people, but about an hour and a half north of Dallas. So we're a small little town. But yeah, we've been able to build, it's kind of a great kind of wellness center here. So super happy to do that. So we work with, happy to help anyone we can. If they have some questions, they can reach out to us here at the office. We work with people around the US. We work with people in person. So we do the same history either way. We also have, we know some doctors who affiliate around. So if you want help finding someone near you, we're happy to help with that as well. But, how we work with people online is similar to how we work, in person, which starts with, a first visit's about, we'll spend about an hour with someone and really go through it. And the new patient paperwork is fortunately or unfortunately 10 pages. I would like to ask a lot of questions, but I feel like you get a lot of information at the beginning, and I read every single page, and we'll go through that information with the patient. And I think you can learn a lot from a really good history by being able to connect the dots or not. And sometimes things make sense, and it's like, this is my experience. And, like I said, headache's one of these four things, and you find the one, and then, they get better and it's great. Or, stomach discomfort or, inflammatory disease of bowel is one of these three things. You work through that. Great. Or there's other, or it's like, hey, there's something new here. And then you kind of get curious and kind of dig in. But that's kind of, that's kind of what our approach is, kind of looking at that, whether someone's in the office or more kind of online or over Zoom.
Awesome. Awesome. And if folks
Yeah.
want to look at your book, get a sense of those 5 truths of transformational wellness and holistic healing, it's timelessyouthbook.com, correct?
Yep. You can find it there. You can find it on Amazon, Timeless Youth, YOUTH on Amazon, and you're available anywhere books are sold. So you can get it there as well.
Okay. And you're on Instagram as well, is what I hear.
Yeah. The word on the street is true. Yeah. You can find me just my name, Jeff Crippen, JEFFCRIPPEN. You can find me on Instagram as well.
Excellent. So now folks know where to find you. Let's leave them with one pearl they can take away right now, something actionable that they can do, just thinking about their total health and transforming their health. What was one thing anybody and everybody could do to just get started on that process of transforming their health?
I think really, if we took it one thing, I think it would be looking at that mental shift of thinking about that plant and thinking about that brown leaf on that plant and thinking about, giving it some water, giving it some sunlight, giving it some healthy soil versus seeing that as a symptom to be cut off or painted over. Right. I think if we can really look at our health that way, so we have a headache, right? Or we have shoulder pain, or we have some digestive discomfort or some bloating in the stomach, right? What do we need to do to cover up the symptom? And that's one way of looking at it. But if you really want to create health, I'd encourage you and the practitioner you're working with to really look at what is the body telling you through that symptom? What created that symptom and what do you need to look through? And how do you do that? Take some work. It's certainly the path of least resistance is not to eat well, right? The path of least resistance is just to take a drug and do that. But I think the value of working through kind of a holistic understanding of health is a huge, huge piece right there. And just going back to that idea of, health is the presence of something and disease is the absence of health. So we no matter what we're doing, what are some of those principles? What are some of those practices that take us closer to health? And the more you can apply that, more work towards and have a clear vision of what you do want, the better you'll have a clear vision of where you want to go. So there's whole bunches of ways and tips and tricks to apply that. And we could jump into that for a whole bunch of diseases, and I'd be happy to go through that for where someone is. But I know it's not the easiest thing to look in terms of like a single one takeaway piece, but I think it's actually the most powerful. I heard a quote once that like, if you learn the methods, you'll be forever tied to those methods. But if you learn the reason why the method was created that way, you'll be free to innovate and create and understand that. Like if you only know the tips and tricks, right, you're always dependent on somebody else telling you another tip and trick. But if you can understand the principles that underlie that method, I think it sets you up for really, I think that sets you up for transformational wellness, which is the reason I wrote that book. Like I said, it's for the little 6-year-old me and the mom in the office, or the patient who's been to 3 different doctors and they feel like, why isn't anybody listening to me? Or why can't anyone just understand me? And I think if we look at it from a perspective of what is health instead of what is covering up the disease, I think that is transformational in and of itself.
Excellent. Well said. Well said. And especially the part about why isn't anyone listening to me or really taking the time to understand me?
Yeah.
I think that's incredibly important and something that, I think folks can go to your book, the Timeless Youth book, and get the rest of the steps so that they can understand the why behind all of these things and move themselves forward. So Dr. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on today. Sincerely appreciate it. And great work out there. We need more folks like you.
Awesome. I feel the same way. Thanks for fighting the good fight out there, and appreciate the opportunity to connect.
My pleasure.
Hey, Health Junkies, are you feeling just off? Feeling like you're aging a little bit faster than you want to and wondering what in the world is up? Hey, I might have some answers for you and some direction. If you want to chat with me, I am offering complimentary calls right now. You can head over to Dr. spelled out JKRAUSEND.com. Take my quiz, click on the schedule a chat, and let's talk and see if we can get you in the right direction. And if I'm able to help you, I'm going to let you know. Otherwise, I'm going to help you find what you're looking for. Head over to drjkrausend.com and check it out now. Hey, fellow health junkie, thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening. Hey Health Junkies, are you feeling just off? Feeling like you're aging a little bit faster than you want to and wondering what in the world is up? Hey, I might have some answers for you and some direction. If you want to chat with me, I am offering complimentary calls right now. You can head over to Dr. spelled out JKrausend.com. Take my quiz, click on the schedule a chat, and let's talk and see if we can get you in the right direction. And if I'm able to help you, I'm going to let you know. Otherwise, I'm going to help you find what you're looking for. Head over to drjkrausend.com and check it out now. Hey, fellow health junkie, thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening.